31 years ago, I gave my son my entire retirement savings, every dollar I had, to pull him out of a bankruptcy that wasn't entirely his fault. Last spring, his wife told me I didn't match the energy of their daughter's graduation party, the party I paid for. I'm still turning that sentence over in my head. Didn't match the energy. I drove a delivery truck for 26 years. I worked doubles on holidays so my son could go to a college I never set foot in. I don't know what energy she was looking for, but I apparently didn't have it. Let me start from the beginning, because this isn't just about a party. My name isn't important. What's important is that I'm 63 years old, I live alone in a 2-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee, and until 14 months ago, I was still co-signing loans I had no business co-signing. My son, I'll call him my son, because that's what he is, that's the only title that matters here, is 41. Good-looking kid. Smart. He got his mother's eyes and, I used to joke, my stubbornness. His mother passed when he was 19, and after that it was just the two of us for a long time. We weren't close in the way people describe in movies. We didn't throw a baseball in the yard or talk about feelings over dinner. We were close in the way that two people are when there's nobody else. You show up. You don't have to explain why. He met his wife at 29. She was from outside Atlanta, came from a family that had money going back a couple of generations. Not old money, but comfortable money. The kind where nobody ever had to think too hard about the electric bill. She was polite when she met me, shook my hand, smiled at the right times. I noticed she looked around my house the way people do when they're trying to figure out what category to put you in. I didn't say anything. He seemed happy. That was enough for me. They got married in 2016. Her parents put up most of the wedding. I contributed $4,000, which was what I had liquid at the time, and I wore the suit I bought for my wife's funeral 15 years earlier. It still fit. My son thanked me. His wife thanked me. Everyone shook hands and took photos, and that was that. For the first couple of years, things were fine. We had Thanksgiving together once at their place in Marietta. She cooked well. I brought a pecan pie from a bakery in Knoxville, and she put it on the counter and it never made it to the table. I noticed that too. Still didn't say anything. Then, in 2019, my son called me on a Tuesday night. I remember it was Tuesday because I'd just gotten home from a late shift and I was still in my jacket. He said he needed to talk. That's never a sentence that leads anywhere good. He and his wife had opened a home staging business 2 years earlier. She had the eye for it, he had the organizational mind, and together they'd built something real, except the market shifted. They'd overextended on equipment and a warehouse lease, and now they were looking at somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 in debt they couldn't service. The business wasn't dead, it just needed a bridge. 6 months, maybe 8, and they'd be stable. He asked me if I could help. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. I felt scared. I had $94,000 in a Roth IRA that I'd been building for 11 years. That was my retirement. That was the plan. I was 52 years old, and that account was the difference between aging with some dignity and becoming a burden on somebody else. I also felt something that's harder to name, something that had been sitting in my chest since his mother died, since I watched him grow up without her, since I watched myself fail to give him the kind of childhood where someone takes care of things. I felt like this was my chance to actually fix something. I liquidated $87,000, paid the penalties, paid the taxes, wrote him a check and told him it wasn't a loan, it was a gift, because I didn't want money sitting between us. He cried. I hadn't seen him cry since the funeral. He hugged me in a way he hadn't since he was maybe 12 years old. His wife was on the phone too. She was crying as well, or close to it, and she said, "I don't know how to thank you. I really don't." The business recovered. More than recovered. By 2022, they had 12 employees, a second location, and a contract with 2 regional real estate firms. They bought a house, a real house, not a starter home, in a neighborhood where the lawns are maintained by professional services and the driveways have 2 cars that cost more than my annual salary ever did. I was proud of them. I want to make that clear. I was genuinely, completely proud of what they built. I visited twice after they moved in. Both times I called ahead. Both times I was there for less than 3 hours. The second time, I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone in the kitchen while my son was showing me the backyard. I wasn't trying to listen. The house just carried sound. I heard her say, "He's here again. I know. I know." And then her voice dropped. I told myself I'd misheard, or misread the context. People say, "I know," about all kinds of things. But I started noticing other things. The way phone calls from my son came less frequently, and when they came they were shorter, a little careful, like he was choosing each word slightly more deliberately than he used to. The way invitations to family events, their friends' birthday parties, a 4th of July thing, stopped coming the way they used to. The way my daughter-in-law, when I did see her, had a particular smile that reached her mouth but stopped there. I told myself families drift. It happens. He had his life, I had mine. I wasn't the kind of father who needed to be central. Then their daughter graduated from college in May of last year. My granddaughter is 22. She studied communications at the University of Georgia. She's a good kid. She texted me on my birthday every year without fail, even as a teenager, which tells you something about her character. I'm proud of her too. Maybe more straightforwardly than I'm proud of her parents. Because she built herself without me watching very closely. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday. The party was the following Friday evening at their house. My son called me on a Monday and told me about the party. I said I'd be there. I asked if I should bring anything. He said just himself. I drove 3 hours. I showed up with a card that had $500 in it and a small gold necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, my wife, that I'd been saving for a moment that felt right. I'd had it cleaned and reboxed. There were maybe 40 people there. Friends of my granddaughter's from college, a couple of her childhood friends, her parents' friends, her in-laws' extended family on her mother's side. Nice people. Expensive wine. A catering setup that probably ran $2,000. My daughter-in-law met me at the door. She was gracious. She took my hostess gift. I'd also brought a bottle of Tennessee whiskey because I didn't want to come empty-handed, and she set it on a table near the entrance. She smiled that smile. And then, about 40 minutes into the evening, she found me near the beverage table and said, in a lowered voice, very pleasantly, like she was making a scheduling suggestion, "I hope you don't mind. We're trying to keep the energy really cohesive tonight, and I think it might be more comfortable for you if you headed out a bit early. It's a younger crowd." I looked at her. "I drove 3 hours," I said. "I know, and we so appreciate that. We really do." I looked across the room at my son. He was talking to someone, a man about his age in a linen shirt. He glanced at me. He knew. I could see in his face that he knew exactly what was being said to me, and he had decided, in that moment, to stay where he was. I set down my drink. I found my granddaughter. She was wonderful. She hugged me hard and said she loved the necklace. She said it without even opening the card first, and I said I needed to head out. She looked confused. I told her I had a long drive. She said, "But you just got here." I smiled and said some version of the truth, which is that sometimes adults have conversations that require other adults to leave rooms. I drove home in the dark. 3 hours. I stopped once for gas and coffee, and I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before I went back in. I wasn't crying. I was doing the thing I do when something gets through, the part of me that's still my father's son. The part that doesn't show pain in public, where I just go very quiet and very still and wait for the feeling to become something I can carry. Here's what I kept coming back to. Not the insult, not even the embarrassment. What I kept coming back to was my son's face. The moment he looked across the room and looked away, that was the decision. That was the thing I couldn't set down, no matter how many miles I drove. I want to be fair to him. I have tried in the months since to be fair to him. He is a man who married a woman he loves, and sometimes love makes people do smaller versions of themselves. I understand that dynamic. I lived in a marriage. I know how one person can become the weather in your house. But he is also a man who, when he was 32 and staring at $90,000 of debt, called his father on a Tuesday night. And his father answered. I didn't do anything immediately. That's important to understand. I'm not an impulsive person. I got home, I went to bed, I went to work the next day. What I did over the next few weeks was think, and remember, and take stock. The $87,000 had come with no paperwork, no promissory note, no agreement. It was a gift, freely given, no strings. I had no legal claim on it, and I never wanted one. But I also had not, in the subsequent 5 years, received so much as a card that acknowledged what that gift cost me. No conversation about my retirement. No, Dad, how are you fixed? Is there anything we can do? Nothing. I also, during this period, had a conversation with my attorney, a man I've used for 20 years for basic estate planning, and I told him the full picture. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I pay him for. When I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" I told him. First, I revised my will. My son had been the sole beneficiary. He no longer is. My granddaughter receives 60% of my estate directly. The remaining 40% goes to a veterans organization I've supported for years, in my wife's name. Second, there was a matter of my son's business. In 2019, when I wrote that check, it was framed as a gift, but I had also, in 2021, agreed to co-sign a business line of credit, $150,000, as a favor when their bank required additional collateral during an expansion. I was still on that document. My attorney reviewed it and confirmed that I had the right to formally request removal as co-signer with 90 days' notice, which would require them to refinance or provide alternate collateral. I sent the letter. Third, and this one was quiet, the kind of thing that doesn't make noise until it does. I had been paying for my granddaughter's health insurance since she graduated. She'd aged off her parents' plan at 26, hadn't started her new job yet, and there was a gap. My son mentioned it casually, and I said I'd cover it. $62 a month, automatically charged to my card, something I'd never thought about once it was set up. I called and cancelled it. Not to punish her, I sent her a check for 3 months of coverage and a note explaining she'd need to make her own arrangements. And I told her why, not in detail but enough. She deserved honesty. She called me 2 days later. She said, "Grandpa, I'm so sorry." I told her it wasn't her fault. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. I told her the necklace looked beautiful in the photos she'd sent me. She cried a little. I didn't, but it was close. My son called 3 weeks after the co-signer letter arrived. I let it go to voicemail the first time. The second time, I picked up. He started with logistics, the co-sign removal, the timeline, what it would mean for their credit line, and I let him work through it. When he finished, there was silence. "Dad," he said, "what is this about?" "You know what it's about." More silence. "She shouldn't have said that to you. At the party, I know that." "You watched her say it." He didn't have an answer for that. I didn't need him to. Some silences are the answer. "I didn't know she was going to say something," he said finally. "Not like that." "Maybe not. But you knew the room. You knew how things had been going. And you stayed where you were." There was a long pause. I heard him breathe. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't want you to say anything right now," I told him. "I want you to sit with what I'm telling you. Do you remember what you said to me in 2019? When I told you I was cashing out the IRA? Dad, You said, "I don't know how to thank you. I never will." Do you remember that? Yes. I believed you. I want you to know I believed you completely. I let that sit. The cosign removal is a 90-day process, I said. Your attorney will walk you through it. It's not designed to hurt you. It's designed to protect me. Those are two different things. I hung up. The business line of credit was refinanced without much trouble. They built enough of a track record that the bank was willing to restructure without me. The will change, obviously, he didn't know about yet. My granddaughter knows I've taken care of her, because I told her so when she asked. She didn't ask for details. She's wiser than her age. My daughter-in-law sent me an email about 6 weeks after the phone call. It was carefully worded. I could tell it had been drafted and revised. She said she had expressed herself poorly at the party, that she hadn't intended to hurt me, and that she hoped we could move forward as a family. I read it twice. I wrote back once. I told her I accepted that she hadn't intended the harm. I also told her that intention and impact are two separate things, and that what mattered to me was not her intent, but the pattern, the years of small exclusions, the phone calls that stopped coming, the pie that never made it to the table. I told her that I'd spent 11 years building a retirement I liquidated for their survival, and that at no point in the years since had either of them asked whether I was okay. I told her I loved my son. I told her I loved my granddaughter. I told her I was open to a future that was built on something real. I have not heard back. That was 4 months ago. My son and I have spoken twice since then. Brief and careful, both of us feeling our way along something that isn't quite broken, but isn't intact either. He is not a bad person. I genuinely believe that. He is a man who made a series of small surrenders over several years and woke up one day to find that the sum of them was something he had to own. I don't know what happens next. I'm not sure that's the point. What I know is this. I stopped waiting for someone to look across a room and choose me. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could absorb quietly. I started making decisions about my own life with the same clarity I brought to every decision I ever made for him. My retirement account is being rebuilt. I'm 63. It'll take time. The house is mine, the mornings are mine. The pecan pie I brought to Thanksgiving made it to the table this year because I ate it alone in my kitchen, and it was the best thing I'd tasted in a long time. My granddaughter visited me last month. She drove up from Athens by herself. We sat on my back porch and drank iced tea, and she told me about her new job, and I told her about her grandmother. And we talked for 4 hours without either of us checking a phone. When she left, she held on a few seconds longer than she usually does. Some things, once you stop holding them, find their way back to you on their own terms. The things that don't, well, that tells you something too. I've been sitting with this long enough now that I can see the shape of it clearly. What happened between me and my son didn't start at a graduation party in Marietta. It started years earlier, in the small moments I let pass without saying anything. The pie that never made it to the table. The phone calls that got shorter. The smile that stopped reaching her eyes. I told myself families drift. I told myself he was busy, she was adjusting. These things take time. What I was really doing was choosing comfort over honesty. And when you do that long enough, you don't prevent a problem. You just delay it until it's larger than either of you knows how to hold. I don't think my son is a cruel person. I said that in the story and I mean it. But I watched him make 100 small choices over several years, each one defensible on its own, each one a little quieter than the one before, and the sum of those choices was a man who stood across a room while his wife asked his father to leave. That's not one bad decision. That's a pattern, and patterns, once you see them clearly, are hard to unsee. Here's what I know about the $87,000. I gave it freely. I don't regret giving it. What I regret is that I gave it without ever having a single honest conversation about what it meant. For me, for my retirement, for the relationship, I thought money given without conditions was the purest form of love. What I've learned is that love without honesty isn't pure. It's just unspoken expectation. And unspoken expectations are debts that collect interest in silence. The thing about removing my name from that cosign, revising the will, cancelling the insurance, none of those were acts of anger. I want to be honest about that. I was not a man in a rage when I made those calls. I was a man who finally decided that his own life deserved the same careful attention he'd been giving everyone else's. That's not revenge. That's just being fair to yourself after a long time of not being. What I've had to build back at 63 is harder than rebuilding a retirement account. It's the habit of valuing my own judgment, of trusting that when something feels wrong, I'm allowed to say so, of understanding that protecting myself is not the same as abandoning someone. My father called that having a backbone. I spent a lot of years confusing a backbone with hardness. They're not the same thing at all. One keeps you upright. The other just keeps people at a distance. Ren drove up from Athens and sat on my back porch and we talked for 4 hours. She didn't ask me to explain myself. She didn't try to broker a peace. She just showed up. 18 months ago, I would have called that a small thing. Now I understand it's the whole thing. The willingness to show up for someone without being asked, without an agenda, without calculating what it costs you. Some people learn that early. Some of us need a long drive home in the dark to figure it out. I'm still figuring things out, but I'm doing it with my eyes open now.